Hello everybody and welcome back to episode 11 of 97% Fire's home recording studio setup. We are in the control room that we created from a small office. If you would like to see any of the process, you can have a look in the description, it's all there. On today's episode, I shall be showing you how I made this theme tune. So the theme tune was created about a year ago on this laptop. Interesting fact, this runs in 44.1 kilohertz, as does the Duet box, whereas this computer and this mixing desk runs in 48k, so it was easier just to plug this in to demonstrate the process. Now the signal flow is the audio comes out the laptop through the Duet and then straight back in to the Mackie control and out the speakers. And also we have a controller which is controlling Logic and new fancy pants microphone. My son has bought me this microphone from a charity shop that was £11. So we're going to try and do screen recording via that mic rather than worrying about the lapels that are on the iPad. Right, let's get to it. First thing I'm going to do is show you how I set up the screen recording so that we can hear the door and also the microphone at the same time. So I have downloaded Black Hole, which routes audio between apps. Exactly what it says on the website. It's really good. It was free. I'm sure there's various different versions of the same type of program. However, I hit download, put in my email address, installed it, and it worked straight away. So there you go. What more could you ask for? So once you've downloaded that, the next thing you need to do is to go to your audio Midi setup, which you can do by pressing Command and Space and typing in audio Midi setup, and that'll open the app and bring up this page. And I added a new QuickTime player input, which is here. So this was, you go to create aggregate device, which is what this is, and then I've renamed it. And in this device, in this setup, I've added the Black Hole and the Duet USB, which is my Apogee interface for this particular computer. After you've done that, you then go to, you have to add multiple output device, and I've called that screen record with audio. And the same thing again, I've added the Duet and the Black Hole, making sure that Duet is primary. And you can mess it around with sample rates and so on. Okay, then the next stage was to connect this microphone to the Duet, which you can see bubbling away there nicely. And then the next stage after that is I had my output set to the Duet, which went through the studio speakers, and my input is the QuickTime player input. So everything that we're recording is going into QuickTime Player first. Okay? And then last of all, in your drawer, so in Logic, I went to Settings, and then to Audio, and then for the device input, I've got the USB, and for the device output, so Logic will output to the screen recording, which is QuickTime. So it's going out to QuickTime. And there you have it. And then hopefully you can hear me, and also I just hit mute because it's also come out on my speakers, so it will then go back into the microphone. So you might have to have a play around, swapping between outputs as you record, and then play back. There you go. That's how I got to where I am. Okay, so to record the theme tune, I used a range of software-based synthesis techniques to produce a 12-part sample-based drum playback instrument. Now you can see here in Logic I created a track for each of the instruments that I wanted to make. So I've got tom-toms, kick drum, kick in, kick out, hi-hats, open hi-hats, closed, cymbals, hand claps, and so on. And the idea being that every single tone that you hear has been generated using some type of synthesis. So at least 6 of the sounds have been created using only analog style subtractive synthesis methods. So these started off by using simple waveforms like a sine wave, triangle wave, sawtooth, square wave, white noise as their starting point. And some further sounds were developed using FM, granular, wavetable, and adaptive synthesis. So when it comes to drums, drums have a set of fundamental frequencies. So I looked up the fundamental frequencies of my drum kit, which I have next to my acoustic drum kit. So I could see that the kick drum has a fundamental of 65 Hertz, which is a C2, and then the snare is 164 Hertz, which is E3, and so on. So I use this as a starting point. So if we go to the kick drum first, which is here, if I open up Retro Synth, yeah, come back. You can see the envelopes. Now this is the setting that I have used for the open hi-hat. So if I go to the kick drum, it's always good when you're playing with this sort of stuff, you might stumble across something that sounds a bit like the thing you're trying to create. So always save it as a preset, and you can always go back and alter it. So we're going to go to the kick drum. This is the analog retro synth, which I believe is a classic Moog emulation. So you've got different shapes, filters, low frequency oscillators, filter envelopes, amp envelopes, and you can mix between the two oscillators. So what I've achieved is this as a kick drum. So I've gone for a sound that's got a bit of attack and then the thud, and you can blend this. So less click, more to your heart's desire, and then the decay as well, because otherwise you can hear it's more of an organy sound. So they're the settings for that. So it's a basic sawtooth wave that's been filtered to mimic the thud of the kick drum, and then I've swept and filtered the amp and the flange to add a bit of kick and thickness. So the eventual GM note of this was A10, and if you stick it into a frequency analysis it shows about 35 Hertz, which is actually quite low. So next we'll go to the hi-hat preset. Hi-hats open and then hat closed. So again, we've gone for different shapes and a really quick envelope. And then the hat's open, it's got a bit more of a hiss. So in effect you would have hat's open and closed. So the hi-hat was created using oscillator 1 as noise and oscillator 2 as a sawtooth wave, and I've blended 80% of that to oscillator 1. The attack for the hi-hat open to replicate the lack of choke. Now the hats were then recorded and EQ'd as you would an old drum kit. So next we move on to the toms. So again, using a sawtooth wave, the envelope was shaped to give the desired characteristic. This is more of your sort of electronic toms, your rock chicken set as opposed to an actual acoustic tom. Although to mimic the traditional drums, background noise and overtones were added and then are blended at 10%. Again, it's all blend to taste. So background noise overtones were added, blending at 10% of oscillator 1 noise to create the effect of the background snare ringing. So if you ever hit a tom on a live kit, you can generally hear the rattle of the snare. Well, you can if you use my drums anyway. Overtones were introduced to give thickness. These samples were created using 4 different intervals, although depending on the key that your music is in, you could actually tune any of these drums using the keyboard GM mapping to any note you wanted. And then the last one for retro synth is hand claps. Which again will be a really sharp attack. So this was actually created by mistake. I was trying to make a snare drum as it goes, but it ended up at 60% white noise and 20% sawtooth, which is here. So you've got your white noise and your sawtooth, and then you can blend. So if I unblend it, it goes really metallic, almost like hitting the top of a plastic tube. And then there's some flange in there as well. So you can hear, if I press and hold, you can hear the actual white noise. So to shape that, we engage the circuit. Okay, now we move on to the snare drum. Now this is in ESP. Polyphonic synth. And then we go to snare test. You can hear it's not a million miles away from the hand claps. So the snare was generated by adding a sub-oscillating rectangular wave, 1 octave down, and then mixed to 10%. So we've got 2 sounds happening at the same time. White noise generator was set to 90, so that's that there. The overtones were generated by driving the overdrive levels to maximum with a decay slider around 40%. And this was all pitched so it would work with the hand claps. Now, in terms of making things by mistake, which sometimes is the best way, if we open Alchemy, the next sound is, hopefully I've said it was a preset. I've not actually opened this for over a year since I made it, so I'm a bit hesitant. I'm desperately trying to remember what on earth it was I did. And there we go. So this is called, and I'm going to pronounce it wrong, and I apologise to everybody in the world, Bonang, which is a type of drum, as you can see here. So a million years ago, when I was at university, one of our tutors was into gamelan music, and we were assigned a task to create our own instruments, and actually made piano, which is a cross between a guitar and a piano, and a bonga, which is like a type of Indonesian gong, really, I suppose, held by strings in a wooden rack. And that's what this represents. So the characteristics of the sound are, there's different envelopes going on so that you get the damp and then the ringing sound with the metallic overtones. And this was done using the X1, Y1. So by changing and blending between the two, X1 and X2, so if you listen, that's a really metallic sound, so you can have more or less, and then you can affect this attack, hold, decay, sustain, release, and just blend. I was after some control to the shimmer, which I think we've achieved. So next we go to Cowbell, hopefully. Is it the Cowbell? So this time was a bit reminiscent of the classic synth track Popcorn, which is, I sort of found the sound by accident again by just fiddling, and I really liked it. Obviously it's not the same, it's probably nowhere near how they made it, but I liked it as the melodic tone for the intro. And next we go on to something a bit more percussion. So we've got Snake Shaker here. Again, these are used as effects. So as you hold, so you can either trigger to get a shaker, or you can hold. So what we did here was we inserted shaker sound 1 onto pad 1 and a half time shaker onto pad 5. Yeah. Okay. And then we use the modulation wheel assigned to the XY pads. So on my keyboard I've got a modulation wheel and a pitch bend, and you can see here, if I don't move the mouse and move the modulation wheel, I can actually affect that signal. So I blended between these two in real time as I recorded the sample. The granular arpan introduced elements of randomness to the stereo field. So if you're listening in stereo, you should hear it sort of travel from left and right and so on. And that's to mimic the way you would actually play a shaker. You're not necessarily going to be standing dead still in one place because the thing moves, unless you attach a microphone to it, which would be quite exciting. And then we go on to rock cymbal. I think we want rock cymbal. So this is part of the drums, electronic-esque drums. I'm sure you'll agree that sounds just like a Sabian crash cymbal, in no way whatsoever. So the rock cymbal was just about partials and harmonics and the manipulation of them. But it did make for quite a cool tone. So if we go into the envelope follower, you can actually sort of see Actually see what's going on, which is pretty cool. So if we go to Raygun, so the Raygun is played forwards and backwards, and these were generated again just through experimentation. We incorporated an original IR sample, and then the rock cymbal sample was manipulated using all the parameters just on a trial and error process using the synthesizer to get some cool sounds. So the way it worked was we took all those individual sounds, and I can solo them here. And then they were recorded into little bite-sized samples so they could make a sample pack. So there's 5 different instances of the snare drum, as you can see. We've put envelopes and stuff on them, and they have also been EQ'd according to taste. These are the toms. And so on with the kick, open hi-hats, close hi-hats, and so on. So this is how we built up the sounds. They were then all bounced out as audio and put into a folder. So once you've created your samples in whichever way you chose to do it, maybe it was synthesis, maybe it was banging a couple of coconuts together to get a horseshoe sound, you then export them as audio. So we have now got effectively a sample pack. Now I can now import all of these into Sampler, or you could use Contact or ESS24, whatever you choose. So it's good to try and make sure these are top and tailed, EQ'd, the correct length that you desire, so you don't clip off any decays, that sort of stuff. These are the Rayguns forward and backwards. Forward and then the Raygun backwards, just for fun. Right, so that is our sample pack, and we load that into Sampler in Logic Pro. Where has it gone? It's hiding all the way down there. So if we solo that channel. So as you can see, I've done various tests. So I've done the drum pack. So I've done various tests. This is the drum pack, which has been mapped to the MIDI keyboard. And once you're happy with how everything's working, you can then move on to the final iteration. This is the full sample pack that you've just seen, and this has been mapped to the keyboard. So you can see we've got our gongs, our claps, our cowbells, so on. You can actually see the waveform for them. So you can see the notes that we play. So if I hit middle C on my keyboard, you can see it's mapped. Although I've gone up a couple of steps here and there. So C2, velocity 0 to 127, will play a kick drum. Now this is in round robin form, so as I press the same key, you see it flashing here, you'll notice the kick drum is moving, and that's playing the 3 different samples that we just saw, just to give you a bit of variation. Now the way you set this up is by going into a thing called round robin. So round robin's here, and you can make a group where you can add different devices to different groups. So you can see there the hats are in one group, the kicks are in another group, the hat's closed, and so on. Yep, and you can add stuff and take stuff away. And you can also change the velocity sensitivity of this. So if you press gently, you might get one variance of it. If you press hard, you might get two at the same time. If you press really hard, you might get all three. You see the velocity sensitivity. When I press gently, between 0 and 99 as a velocity reading, I get this sample. If I press really hard, so the velocity goes above 99 to 126, then it will play a different sample backwards, but it's the same key. So there's 3 there for the cowbell. So there's a cowbell, and then there's an octave of the cowbell. So depending how hard you press, you can get different instances of the same thing, which is fun, because if you then load all of that into... Oh, it's broken. There we go. So if you then load all of that into a MIDI region, because you've already mapped all your different tones, you can then write a tune, move it as you wish, and have elements of random or completely deliberate. Oh, alternative ending. So there you go. All you have to do next is then bounce that down as one audio track and then load it into iMovie, and you can make the start of your YouTube series. So there you go. Hopefully you found some of that interesting. If you'd like a copy of any of the audio you heard today, it's available for free on the website. You don't even have to put in your email address. You just hit download and save it to your device. Thank you so much for watching. Please do consider subscribing, and I'll catch you on the next one.